FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
The whole thing that's really ridiculous about this whole book tour and book itself and the blog itself to me is that it all began entirely as a joke, just as a lark, like entirely as a fling, you know what I mean? So I started a whole bunch of blogs on WordPress and TypePad and Blogger, and it was really just to learn how the software worked, how the actual blog software worked, how to do HTML embedded code and how to do photos. I mean, really, really nuts and bolts. Like, I had to figure that out. So I did one of my own that was just, the Dan Lyons blog, and nobody read it. And then there was I had a family blog with photos. And then I got to Blogger, and I thought, what should I do? And it was just about the time when all these CEOs were starting to blog, and there were all these stories about transparency and openness and honesty and how companies were going to, like Naked Conversations, the Scoble book, if you're familiar with that, or and a few CEOs actually were writing these blogs and sort of pretending to be like open and honest and transparent, but they weren't, right? It was all spin and bull, right? It was absolute just lie. It was just as fake as a press release. Which I thought was really hysterically funny just in and of itself, right? I really thought it was funny. And then I thought, well, what if a CEO started a blog, but like went off the rails, like lost it and went nuts and started really writing the truth, I really, really wanted to say, and and when somebody wrote a bad story about his company, he would make fun of them back, and just really being like as angry as he probably was, right? And then I tried to think which one it would be. I tried a bunch of different ones, and I kind of seized on Jobs because I'm a big Apple fan myself. I like Apple products a lot. And my central frustration as an Apple user is that I was a long-time Windows user too, but when I finally started using OS X, I could not understand how 95% of the world, looks at OS X and then looks at Windows and says, well, I'm going to go with that Windows with the spyware and the McAfee and all that other stuff. And it drove me nuts. And I thought, if it drives me nuts, Jobs must go out of his mind, right? Like, must make him crazy. I mean, he spent 20 years of his life. The roots of that thing go back to the Next days in the 80s, right? So 20 years of your life, working really hard, you produce something really beautiful, and the world goes, yeah, we're going to eat at McDonald's. It's okay, no big deal. So I thought that must be, that central anger of a character, like, kind of was the seed of the jokes. And my beginning was really sort of two-dimensional jokes about Steve Jobs and hanging around in gravity boots and having meetings upside down or drinking smoothies, and they were kind of dumb. But then I started realizing as news would happen, things would happen that like I should be covering for Forbes, but because we come out twice a month, so we have 24 editions a year, and we have huge lead time. Like right now, we're already working on the December editions. And so if something happens today and I really want to write about it for Forbes, it's like, well, who's going to care about it in December? So you have this outlet with a blog that you can do, breaking stuff like the minute it's announced. So I started writing like news, doing what I would do at Forbes, only through the voice of Steve Jobs, right? And it was like a little bit wacky, and it kind of worked, right? It kind of was like, it was actually more interesting than anything I would ever say about some event, because you could imagine what he would think and project that. And so people actually started reading, unlike my own blog, which nobody read. And I could have written the same thing there, and I swear nobody would have read it. But because I had this conceit of, this is supposedly Steve Jobs, people started reading it. I did it for about 6 weeks, and I said, all right, that was fun. I learned how it worked, and I shut it down. And I said, oh, it was okay. And then somebody else put it back up, and they put a thing saying, what happened to this blog? Who is this guy? What happened, And all people started commenting, and I wasn't aware that they were reading it. I knew I had sent it to 2 friends of mine. I sent them links, and I just said, I found this blog, ha ha ha, and I didn't tell them it was me. And one of them blogged about it, and they sort of spread it, but I never owned up to it. So even my friends didn't know it was me, and they'd send it to me. They'd be like, did you see this one today? And I'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, wow, that's pretty good, So I was just playing dumb and doing it, so I shut it down. So I started it back up, because there were so many people, and I didn't even know, this is how clueless I was about blogs, I didn't know about Site Meter, where you could put something on and it'll tell you how many people are on at any given time and who they are. I mean, so somebody actually wrote to me saying, dude, there's this thing called Site Meter, put it on there. So I did, I started it back up, and there were like 100 people there today. So I told my wife, this is weird, like there's people from England and all over the United States, and I don't know who they are. It's not my friends. Like I know the 2 people I told, but I don't know any of these other people, right? And some of them started commenting. It's just like blogs take off. Like people start becoming regular commenters. They became little characters in their own right. There was a guy called Mac Geek Guy who would comment on every post. He lived in San Francisco. I don't know who he is or who he was, but so I remember going for a walk with my wife, and I was saying, this is really weird. Like I've been writing about the internet for, since the internet began as a tech reporter, but like it's different when you put your hand on the third rail and you feel it, and you're like, whoa, like suddenly, yeah, this stuff, it's for real. Like, this is a global network, right, where you put something out there and it spreads. I mean, you know, people all over the world were reading this in small numbers, but, and then I started realizing I could do something like a comic strip where these characters sort of, in my mind, became like fictional characters. So Bono and Larry Ellison and Bill Gates and Al Gore, in my mind, I started reading about Jobs and learning about him, because at first I didn't really know much about him. So I figured if I'm going to do this, I better learn. So I read a bunch of biographies, I learned who the characters were at Apple, and I started developing this world. And it was like you could introduce a story on Tuesday, like Al Gore got thrown out of his house by his wife, and he moved in with us, he's kind of driving us nuts. Boom, leave it alone. Then you go back to covering the news, and then Thursday go, it's really getting bad. Al's like eating meat, he's leaving food wrappers around the house, he cranks the air conditioning, he's a pain in the ass, you know, my wife wants him out. And then go back to covering the news. So, and then like on Saturday, it's like, okay, we figured out how we're gonna get rid of him. We're gonna turn off the air conditioning in the guest house, and we're gonna tell him that, you know, we're going green and we can't afford air conditioning now, and that'll get rid of him. And sure enough, it does, you know, and Al leaves. So I started realizing like you could do like a Doonesbury kind of thing that was fun. And then it became this hybrid of like sort of Doonesbury and then sort of news, right? And then kind of commentary sometimes. It was actually interesting and worthwhile. Like, it wasn't all jokes, right? So, and I was really just playing with the form and trying to figure out like what you could do. And it occurred to me, it's like a really powerful form because it's this online diary, and it's very easy to use, it's very automated, and the blog software, even at Blogger, has become advanced enough that you can really kind of customize and do some cool stuff with it.